Krylons because Krylon usually bonds to plastic, and it'll give it a good coating without you having to keep coating it over and over again. If you do use Rust-Oleum, you just want to make sure not to cross product because you'll get weird effects. You get like crackling or bubbles and stuff because they're two different chemicals that you're mixing. And then we use Dremels and heat guns. Those are the main tools that we use. We use cutting blades. So the Dremel we use to sand off areas, create rounded spaces, edges and stuff like that to clean it up. Also you can use it to carve. You can actually glue foam together in layers and you can actually carve it into different things. That takes a little practice, a little skill, but I think anybody can learn it. The helmet has a lot of clean shapes and everything. We had to use a Dremel to get clean shapes for the helmet and different things like that. The blade is what we use to cut it because if you use scissors, when you cut, you're gonna leave a lot of like hard edges and then you'll have to go back and end up cleaning it anyways with a Dremel. So if you just use a quick blade, just a quick cut, done. The thing is, whenever you use a blade, you dull it. So you have to get a knife sharpener and you literally have to sharpen your blade over and over again. It's better than snapping it off, you know, those snap blades, because the snap blade, it won't give you that straight edge still, it won't give you that sharp edge. You'll just end up getting a sharp point at it. So the best thing to do is to basically sharpen your blade every time you use it. You'll probably get like maybe 5 to 10 cuts before it starts dulling you. Let's see what else. Did you have any input on this?
Well, I was gonna say this is EVA foam, and I sculpted it with a Dremel, and this metallic sort of color changing paint, that is a plastidip paint. It's a spray on plastidip, and like he's saying about plastidip, but I didn't do any acrylic on it. Plastidip takes acrylic paint really well. I like to paint on plastidip things with acrylic paint. If I use spray paint, like I like to use model paint. I was going to mention that when I talked about the 3D prints, but that's like an example of using plastidip, and you don't have to do anything else to it because it just ends up looking really cool.
Yeah, we hardly ever use the colors when it comes to plastidip. We usually just use the black because we know it works well.
I have a lot. I had to special order some of the aluminum silver because the silver is just a sparkle. It's almost like spraying glitter on it. But the aluminum, which I had to order off of Amazon, and it was really expensive for some armor. And then you can do all that sort of dark weathering with black acrylic. It's really simple, but it has to be the aluminum or it doesn't make it that silver, that very opaque silver color.
Yeah.
Chrome, almost, I would say chrome. It's like a chrome finish versus the silver finish is like just a glitter looking.
I like to experiment on that. So, yeah.
I have a bunch of the cans of that. When I bring over that thing we were working on, I'll show it to you. Because I have tons of that stuff left.
Okay. What else were you talking about?
Well, I talked about polydough already and some of the ways I've used it and some of the things you can do with it. You can make your own teeth and everything with it. I haven't talked about 3D prints, and that's kind of like my main thing to talk about is 3D prints and painting. I was also going to talk about you don't have to you don't have to build your own props, you can just paint them. This is the same gun. And this gun actually gets really bad reviews because people are like, it's the wrong color, it doesn't make noise, it doesn't light up, but people are selling these on Etsy for like $60 pre-painted. Like they paint them and then they sell them. But I just primer it with gray primer and then I paint it with model paint. Model paint is, I've been experimenting with model paint because I'm used to painting in acrylic. I discovered last night painting something else that if you use like a broken piece of like wood instead of a brush, it actually makes better like silver scratch weathering scratches. Because this one, I just did this one this week. I pulled this one out and I did this one rather hastily. And this one does have sound. And I had to take it apart a little bit, but I looked at this paint job and I was like, I'm gonna have to fix that. It looks really bad up close. Like I did it really, really fast for being in my friend's movie, which you can go see at 6:30 tonight. Yeah. There's a panel for it. No one was gonna see it up close, so I was just like, real quick, get the paint on so I can have it for the scene. But I'm gonna redo this one because I'm like looking at it and I'm like, model painting skills have improved since then, and my, you know, layering the silver and the gunmetal together and weathering and stuff has improved since I did that. This was done with a brush and it's just really, really caked on. But yeah, sometimes I don't build props. Sometimes I find something that looks really, really good and I just paint it. Like when you go to the store, you get children's toys, the dollar store, all kinds of stuff. You can Nerf guns. You can always customize them without having to build them, or you can use the poly dough and add things to this with poly dough. That's the other fun thing about poly dough. Like this 3D print right here, I dropped part of it and this little bit broke off right here. It's supposed to have one of these. I don't know if you can see it broke off. I'm probably gonna sculpt one with poly dough and glue it back on so that when it's finished, it has the little spikes all the way around. Although I don't think anyone's gonna notice if I don't put that tiny little piece back on there. But 3D prints are very fragile. Do you want me to keep talking about 3D?
Yeah, go.
Okay, 3D prints are very fragile, and a lot of people get 3D prints and they just throw some paint on it and call it good. Some people like to. Okay, so you can get it. I can't really talk about using a 3D printer because I buy mine. I buy mine, or a friend will make me something. A few of these up here are from a friend of mine. This one is one that I bought. It came in 12 pieces. And you get different quality. If a person prints the thing hastily and they put it on for only a few hours, because you have to watch a 3D printer, it can get totally messed up and then it'll ruin your print. And if you're selling them, you don't want that to happen because then you've wasted filament. So if you put it on to print for say like 14 hours, you get something much smoother. I did not have to fill this hardly with Bondo at all because it was so smooth. It just needed a few coats of auto primer and sanding. This thing I had to cover with Bondo glazing and spot putty because this barrel came in 2 pieces like this. I got extra ones because someone started printing it and then they didn't finish it, so then I had to find somebody else to pay. But you can see, and like I said, you guys can come up and look at this. It doesn't match up. Like once you glue this together, you've got these huge gaps in it. And so what I did is I filled the gaps, and like this had to be attached here, so there was a seam here that I had to fill. You can kind of still see the seam on this side. Like this whole thing, this is all seams that had to be filled because it was all in half pieces like this. And you can also see
We'll have time to come up afterwards.
okay. I was
Okay.
going up here, I saw things. You can see all the ridges in it that I had to fill, and then because I had this extra one last year, we talked about, I was on another panel about 3D prints. I went through and I showed all the layers that I do, so you can see with the Bondo spot glazing and spot putty, something like that. You buy it at the auto store. So then you can see how the ridges are filled with it, and it helps you just get it like that much smoother. You have the badges. Please. Okay. So one of the reasons I like to also use the spot putties, because if you get something like this is a wand from Little Witch Academia. This is all one piece, but this would break. If you started really like aggressively sanding it, you might snap this in half. And then you've gotta like glue it, you've gotta fill like the cracks back in. And when I got this, one of these edges on here was like really rough. There was like little threads of filament sticking out, and it just like, it was a mess. And filling it with the spot putty, I ended up getting a much smoother surface to work with, because the whole, like what would have been like the back side that was laying like this while it printed, I think, it was really, really rough. And that happens like with 3D prints. And like this one, I painted after I put it together because it was in so many pieces and all of the seams needed to be filled with the putty. This one came in 3 pieces and I had to fill a couple of seams. We melted holes in the edges, and I have pictures of this on my phone, but we stuck little pieces of popsicle stick in there with some resin adhesive and pushed it in together to hold it so that it would give it a little bit of durability, so that if it gets bumped, it doesn't crack and fall off or fall apart. Yeah, and I started doing detailing on one side, but I haven't finished the detailing on the other side. And this one I haven't painted at all, and I think probably this one I can get away with, again, just a few layers of auto primer. This one fit together really cleanly too. There aren't a lot of seams that I think I would need to fill with the putty. The putty is just a nice way of getting them to just finish cleanly. There's another thing you can get with 3D prints, and it's a flexible filament. And I didn't ask for these to be flexible, but that's what he used. And I got 2 that were the wrong sizes, and I asked him for new ones, so he made me new ones if you want to see what they look like unfinished. But I had to find the spot putty is too stiff. You can't fill something like this with spot putty, or when I do this, it would break. So I ended up using, oh, hang on, my phone. I ended up using Alex Plus by DAP paintable acrylic and latex caulk, like from the hardware store. And I would get my finger wet and I would smooth it out, and there would be little ridges. You can see little places where it had little peaks. I used a little razor cutter to sort of cut off a lot of the peaks, and then I painted right on top of it with acrylic. And this isn't how I would finish it. I just painted it real quick. So you can see this one is half painted. I accidentally bought brown. I was like just grabbing stuff at the hardware store, but you can see how this stuff looks and then how it looks painted if you come look at them. And then the last thing I was gonna say is some 3D prints are so well made that I paint them in pieces like this, because this is just gonna all fit. I left it apart so I could show you. This is all going to fit together like so nicely. Like I probably won't have to glue half of it if I don't want to, because I don't need to paint it in one piece after I assemble it. I'm just gonna leave it unassembled while I paint it, because this goes, wait, there it is.
You probably take that on the plane with you, huh?
See, this is definitely gonna have to be glued right here because this won't stay, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fallout, but this is how, and I've got more little pieces that will definitely not stay put, but this actually fits together so nicely. And again, this is one I didn't have to use a lot of Bondo on. I put some Bondo in here because it was really rough and it came out nice and smooth. But this one, I have mostly just primer and paint. And since this is from Fallout, it can be a little rough. It's gonna actually look better when I weather it if it's messy and rough looking. But some things I just think need to be smoother and more sophisticated, like this Elven blade from Skyrim. I just think it looks nice when it's smooth. And this is, again, this is like spray paint and model paint and a lot of taping. See, this is a lot of taping off, so model paint is actually really helpful because then you can just kind of do it very carefully. You have to tape everything for all these spray paint layers. Because this is also a 3D print. This part here and this part here, and this is PVC pipe. And she printed them specifically to fit in PVC pipe. They have little caps in here, and I found a gal on Etsy that prints them. And then she glued the 2 halves together for me. And I did use Bondo on this because it wasn't super, super smooth. But I did a lot of taping and spray painting and taping and spray painting, and it was getting messy. And I'm like, I should have just hand painted most of it with the model paints, because this got really messed up. And I should have, because this is a spray on model paint, and it's a red glaze, so it's that candy apple, transparent red. You get a couple layers, and it has that really nice, almost like a car, because it's for model cars. It just comes out really pretty, but then it kept getting messed up, and it was just easier to go back over it with gold model paint than gold spray paint. But yeah, you guys have questions about 3D prints? Are we taking questions?
Sure.
Does anyone have questions about 3D prints?
Anybody?
No?
Okay, well, I'll talk about a little bit about foam. So this guy right here, see how wobbly he is? He's actually made of like couch foam. I had to sand the couch foam to get the shape that I wanted. It was really hard. Basically what I had to do is make a sandpaper disc on my Dremel, and I was able to Dremel the shape out. But the thing is, it gets away from you a lot, so you have to have a lot of control, otherwise you'll just take a big old gouge out of it. And then you have to come back and try to fix it. And you know, couch foam, if you just buy a sheet of it, it's super expensive. So you want to make sure not to waste it if you have a decent sized piece of it. So like right here in the ear right here, I gouged a piece out, and You know, you just gotta smooth it out and everything. The base is actually EVA foam. I got a beach ball and I cut it apart and I use that as a stencil to get the round shape. If you guys have seen my Slimer, it's the same size, same shaped ball. And except this is a head, not a body. And after I did the ball, then I started adding features with, you know, the insulation foam that you put like around pipes and stuff, just the round foam stuff. The eyebrows, the lips, those are all made of those foam.
Expanding foam.
It wasn't expansion foam, it was the ones you already buy rounded.
Oh.
You just put it around the pipe when it's cold outside.
Like pool noodles.
What's that?
They're kind of like pool noodles. They're
Like
just
pool
not
noodles, yeah.
Yeah.
And the nose is actually 8 layers of EVA foam glued together and then sanded down to get the shape of the nose. So it took me a while to get a nice clean nose shape, but I think I did pretty good. And then the nose and nostrils are actually a dome. So basically use a heat gun, and the best thing to use is, you know, Easter when you get those gigantic Easter eggs? I've guys seen those like at Michael's and Fry's and everything. Well, basically those are perfect because there's no flat area in it. And what you'll do is you get a heat gun and you'll heat up the foam. And while it's still warm, you push it into the dome. And you let it cool while it's in the dome. So when you pull it out, you'll have the dome shape. Sometimes you have to do it more than once to make sure it keeps that shape. But that's how you get the dome shape for like his helmet or his nostrils. It's great for like breastplates for female armor or shoulder pads, knee pads, elbow pads. So to make domes, that's the trick. So basically his core is EVA foam, and then we got this padding. It's basically couch foam, but a thin layer of it. You got it at Walmart for like $6. And he basically is covered in it. And that's what we use to hide all the seams and everything. And that's why he looks like a clean character. That foam stuff works well with barge glue. Have I talked about adhesives yet?
No, yeah.
Okay, so barge glue is what we use to construct these things. Barge glue you can get on Amazon. Basically what it is, it's a contact cement. But it's on steroids. It's made for repairing shoes. So you know it has to be strong if you gotta repair shoes with it. And basically the whole of Thanos used about 2 cans of barge glue. I used 1 can on this guy right here. All of his body pieces are all put together with barge glue. Sometimes it starts to come apart. We store these in hot tin sheds over the summer. So you know things are gonna warp, and you know sometimes I gotta come back and reheat it, shape it. It's starting to split a little bit, but all I have to do is just put a little more barge in there and then close it back up again and back to brand new. So yeah, I covered him with a thin layer of couch foam. Used barge glue to keep everything together. Even the ears are glued on with barge glue. That's how strong it is. That's all that's holding this ear onto the head. All the little pieces of hair, I had to go in and buy the expensive EVA foam, the stuff you get at like a Joann's, the Yaya and stuff. I didn't want to ever have to buy that stuff, but I didn't want to order online either. So basically this is all that stuff, and what I did was I just cut long triangles out of it and then use a Dremel, and it took me like 3 days to do all this hair.
How's
And
it held in?
what was that?
How do you attach it?
That's just attached with barge.
You use thin side or?
Basically, this is one of them.
Right.
It's the sheet. This is the thickness of the sheet.
Right.
And I got a big sheet of it, and I cut it into a triangle and then
Right.
dremeled it. And then to glue it on, I just slapped a little barge in there and then stuck it on there.
Okay, so right on the edge.
Yeah.
They have
That's how
barge
strong it
and
is.
Tandy leather also, and cans and in tubes.
The thing about that is Tandy sells them for like $60.
Yeah, they're expensive.
But at Amazon, you get it for 30.
The tubes are nice though, if you don't like the can, and then I've seen cosplayers put the barge in like little squeeze bottles
Yeah.
to squeeze it out, but I like the tubes better than the can.
You can also use E6000. E6000 works just like barge, except it takes longer to dry.
Okay.
But the great thing about that is it dries clear. So because it dries clear, it's great for like doing small details, like on facial features and stuff, eyeballs, stuff like that. A lot of Thanos' face, like the eyeballs and stuff, is glued on with E6000. His eyes are glued on with E6000. His teeth are glued on with E6000. Because I don't want to get too brown and messy with the barge, you know, for the details. What else? That's basically it with all the materials for the Thanos and the character over here. My brother Gilbert over here, he brought some more stuff to show. I use a lot of cuff foam to pad the inside of the costume to keep it in place. If I didn't have this here, these would be rattling everywhere when I walked around. Go for it, you can talk about it.
I'm not gonna keep unpacking.
I'll talk about my shoes. Okay, so this is my Thanos shoe. This gives me about 10 inches of height. I've made these before where they're really heavy. This is actually pretty light. So what it is basically there's a piece of wood, like plywood. I cut it to the shape of the shoe that I wanted. And then after that, I got a girl's platform shoe. And just the rubber sole part. So what I did was I pulled out the sole from my tennis shoe and I drilled into the girl's platform shoe. And then I drilled from the board into the girl's platform shoe also. So if I left that alone, it would be too wobbly. I wouldn't be able to walk around. It would be too unstable. So what I do is I spray great stuff. It's expansion foam. It's what you use for insulation around your house, like your windows and stuff. That creates the stability. So I sprayed all around the thing with expansion foam, let it dry about 24 hours. After that, I was able to get a knife and then carve away the excess, get the shape that I wanted. When you do that, you tend to get a lot of powder, like debris. So it's hard to glue that. So what I'll do is I'll cover that with Mod Podge. Mod Podge gives it a skin that allows you to glue the foam onto it. Does that make sense? Is everybody following me? Okay. So after you put the Mod Podge, after you get that skin, now you're able to barge whatever you want to it. You can put foam on it, you can put any material, fabric, and the hard part is just trying to get the shape that you want, getting the shapes in. You use a heat gun to get the, pull and stretch the foam around the shoe. So now that I have the shoe, I can get the height that I want. And I bought these $8 cheap Walmart shoes just because it's Velcro. It's hard to tie your shoes when you're in a big costume and you're trying to reach down and do it. So sometimes it's just better to get Velcro. Velcro only lasts so long, but I don't use it every day, so it should last as long as the costume lasts. And then just to pad it, I put another layer of EVA foam. And that way I can walk on it and it won't be just a plank of wood on the ground. I can actually, I can literally dance in these if I wanted. I've done it before. Oh, so his head I sculpted myself. Took me about 3 months. I use monster clay. Monster clay is what the professionals use for movies and stuff. It's kind of like a wax-based clay, so you got to use heat to keep it pliable. So after I sculpted it, got the look that I wanted, I had to do a rubber mold to it. The rubber mold, what's the place that I got it from, Josh?
What's that?
The rubber mold?
Reynolds?
Reynolds. So I went to Reynolds, got their rubber mold stuff, and I actually was like a brush-on mold. And for the jacket, to keep everything in place, I just used plaster Paris. So I had this big plaster Paris mound, and I was trying to rotocast this gigantic plaster Paris thing. That's how I got this head. So the head is just made out of resin. The neck is a little weak. I've noticed over the past year it's starting to crack a little because I didn't put enough layers there. I could probably still take it off and put a little more resin in there, but it just sounds like a lot of work, so I haven't done it. But yeah, I still have the mold, so I can still make more casts and maybe even sell them or make more costumes. So that's how the head was done. Are you ready?
Yeah. And did you cover this guy?
Yeah, I just didn't talk about the skin.
Yeah, we're looking for different methods to make costumes. We've been doing UVA foam, and every year we want to try something new. So we tried upholstery foam, and we had to find the right silicone. This is the one we chose because you can paint it with acrylics. Normally, silicone, you can't paint it. And what I did was a bunch of experiments. So this right here, you can't tell, but it's got a rubber coat on one side. And this one, like I said, you can paint it, and this one, it's white here, and you can paint it with acrylics, and it doesn't crack, it's flexible. And the reason we went with this is because normally in Hollywood they go with latex, but latex breaks down after a few years, especially in heat, and we're gonna have to store this in the shed outside. And this silicone says it lasts, it's for indoors, outdoors, 7 years mold free. He's gonna be wearing it. So then, just different types. This one was called Through the Roof. It's actually a roof coating and it's much firmer. And the reason we went this direction was eventually we want to have moving mouth, moving cheeks, eyebrows move, all that inside the skin. This is our first prototype, so we were too busy to get it mechanical, but it looks really good. And later on when you guys come up, you can come and touch it and feel how flexible it is. You could also just run silicone, and when you do this, you want to use 100% silicone, and you could use acrylic paints mixed in or food dyes. If you use food dyes, it's translucent, and you can put glitter and anything you want in it. I think I have a food coloring one. Thought I brought it. I think it probably fell out. The other thing too is you can just drape it or smear it right on fabric. This is actually just a sock. And I put it on the pool noodle, and I wanted like a tentacle. I saw a tutorial online where someone did a steampunk dive suit, and one of the arms with this tentacle, a bunch of suction cups. So this was just a trial piece, and it's really flexible, won't crack, and I was able to brush on acrylic paint right on top of it. And it held. And normally it says you can't do it, but you can. It has to be acrylic paint that's in a tube because it's much more flexible. So I had I think I tried 3 different copies, different paints. This one here is the same stuff, but I mixed the blue and the white together. And when you use the acrylic or the silicone, once you put the paint or the dyes together, you have like 3 minutes before it sets. So you have to use just small batches at a time to slowly move. What was good about this one was there was no mixing. You just applied it and it dried very quickly. But we found out he spray painted it and it didn't want to set, it stayed tacky. But we were able to put acrylics and I airbrushed all the colors on there. So this is a direction we're going to go with mechanical puppet like. Think of Jim Henson, Dark Crystal type puppets. You want to talk about this guy?
Does everybody recognize this? Kyle? So I grew a couple of years ago and I wanted Kyle to be on me. So this was just EVA foam with, there's couch foam in here. And we put a layer of faux fur. And the eyeballs are just ping pong balls. I gotta clean it up. Oh, and the nose is actually made of freeform air. I was going around looking for like a teddy bear nose or dog nose or something. Didn't like what I saw, so I actually made my own nose. I use this stuff. It's a 2-part mix. It dries hard. You want to keep water on it though, so you keep it pliable while you're working on it. And you come look. I mean, it's got an awesome little nose. You guys can come up and look at it later. But that's probably the hardest thing on this whole piece that I made. And I basically just do this together. Even got a little dog's collar and everything for it.
And what's nice about that epoxy is it's very light. So I got just a store-bought mask and I added the nose, I added the eyebrow ridges, and it's really light to wear. There's other epoxies that are really heavy, and it's really sturdy. If I drop this, it won't break. That's the plus side of using it. It's lightweight and strong. Do this one. It's over there.
Yeah, put them right here so you can see them.
So another thing we use is we use floral foam. And what's nice is you can sculpt it with just the texture of your hand. So you buy fluorofoam, you stick it together with Mod Podge to make a big block. Because if you try to find a big block, it's really expensive. So then you just put epoxy, which is, did we granny? It's called Smooth on 300. And once you carve this to the shape you want, we applied it and it gets all lumpy, full of bubbles. So then you sand it smooth and you can make a prop like this. So if you can't find it or buy it, you can just make it yourself. And it's really strong. And I just use spray paint. The eyes, I just printed them out, cut them out, put them on there. So it's a good way to make a fast prop that somebody can't buy or find anywhere. And it's really lightweight. Do it epoxy. So one of the problems with making foam is everything you do has to be carved and duplicated, and it would be difficult to make all this scrolling design. So what I did is I was looking for alternatives, and there's a product you can make really easy, and it's 100% silicone, cornstarch, and food coloring. And then you could push it makes it into a clay that's really gooey, and you want to put Vaseline in your hands, and you push it into a fondant mold. And there's thousands of different patterns. So what makes it become solid quickly is the food coloring. So I made these different shapes, and then I tried gluing them onto my foam, and it wouldn't glue because nothing sticks to silicone. So what I had to do was use just straight silicone behind it, put it on, and I drove pins through it, and it held it in place. In 24 hours, I pull out the pins, and it's holding nice and steady. So if you had fancy armor, you can put scrolling, and there's hundreds of different patterns you can make. And these are fondant made for cakes patterns.
Are the fondant molds silicone mold?
Yes.
Or, yeah,
And I also made roses in different shapes. And once you mix it, you put it in, you got like 5 minutes, and it's done. Then you can pull it out and then apply it. It's really sturdy. And you could also use this for molding materials. You're gonna do a one-off mold. But yeah, I made a whole costume, chest piece, 2 forearm pieces, and I have all this nice scrolling design. In this case, this one right here, do you want to talk about this one?
So this is a basic helmet form you can find online. What's the name of that guy?
Evil Ted.
Yeah, Evil Ted has a pattern for this helmet. And we changed it up a little bit to make it into a Greekish type helmet. So the helmet itself is pretty basic. And once you learn how to make a helmet, you can pretty much make anything, because everything that you need to learn is in this piece. But anyways, what makes this piece special is all the found objects. Basically, this is a 99-cent store cheap Barbie doll. This is a little Pegasus that I bought from 99-cent store. I bought 2 of them. And I used the wings from the Pegasus and put it on the Nike that's on the front of the helmet. The hair is actually sculpted out of the same freeform hair. The owl is actually a little metal knob that I got at Hobby Lobby. You know that aisle where they have a bunch of knobs and stuff? Well, this is Athena's helmet. Athena's symbol, animal symbol, is an owl, so I found this perfect little knob owl. Probably costs like $3. All the little rivets, can you hear it? They're googly eyes. And what else? I use 3D paint, the fabric paint, to do all the symboling and everything on it.
You mentioned the feathers.
Oh, the feathers actually, feather dusters. 3 of them. That's probably the most expensive thing on this thing, is because feather dusters aren't cheap. And then this is just 99-cent store rope.
So that's another option besides the way I did it. You can use a rope and use that as your detailing. And this is basically the pattern. You can see you got 2 top rolls and the two sides. And when you cut it, this side would be rounded and have like a rounded shape, but this has to be converted to flat so you can cut it. So once you cut, you design the one side, you use that one pattern, you have an inside and a right side. So you'll write right on one side, on the inside, right, left. That way, when you put it together, both sides are exact copies. And we cut it into foam, and you'll see we marked it. That's basically what it looks like. And this fits really comfortable. We made it for wig head. Then we scanned it on a computer, and we're able to size it to our size. And I think ours is like 10 or 20% bigger than this. And we can make it bigger and smaller. And this is actually the hardest thing we've made. This is like, if you can do this, you can make Thanos. Because this is the hardest thing. Because there's some fight to it. You're like fighting and lining things up. And all these little lines here are called registration marks. So when you have your pattern, you'll have your registration marks here. When you're putting it all together, you're matching everything up, so by the time you get to the end, everything fits right. If you didn't have that, you'll end up with one side longer than the other because it's malleable. You're either pushing in or pulling and tugging it, trying to get everything lined up right.
And because you're using many pieces, dealing with both sides, you always want to mark what you have. We always have it front, back, left, right.
Yeah, we have front, back, yeah, they're all there. And the glue, you were talking about glue?
Just barge
Okay.
and E6000.
So this is what barge looks like, and you can buy it online. It goes for $23. It's industrial strength contact glue. It's actually made for gluing soles onto shoes. It lasts years, stays flexible. This is alternative. You can buy it locally. The problem with this is after a couple of years, it starts to turn hard. And if you were to flex, say this was a few years old and I flex it, it actually will crack and rip the foam. This one won't do that.
Anybody have any?
I talked about most of my stuff, although I didn't bring it. I have a huge Harley Quinn mallet, and I used concrete form tube from Home Depot to make that cylindrical shape so that it's hollow inside and lightweight. And those concrete form tubes are really nice for covering the EVA foam and doing some of the stuff that they do if you need a cylinder. So that's another thing you can find. Hardware stores have all kinds of fun stuff.
So I made this mallet. It's really lightweight. It's actually a cardboard box, and I sprayed expansion foam, and it's the black hand. The black hand is the one that turns very, very hard and rigid.
Great stuff.
Yeah. And the pipe is actually PVC pipe, and I used craft foam, and I just braided it across. Once you spray this all the way across, then I went ahead and shaved it. I purposely wanted all these indentions. I wanted it to be like a geo mallet, something that looked magical. All the insides just glitter. I carved up a lot of the sides, and I wanted this part smooth. What else did I do? And this is just a rubber ball, and I Mod Podged it and spray painted. If you don't Mod Podge it first, what happened is the spray paint will make it tacky and it won't dry. And then I covered everything in a clear resin to give it strength. Even the ball's hard. So this is very light. It looks heavy, but it's super light.
That's it. Anybody have any questions? You're welcome to come up and. Yeah.
How old is Thanos? Because I know you've had it at a couple places. It's traveled.
This is the second year. So, yeah, I made it for Tucson Comic Con last year. So,
He's had what, a head repaired already?
yeah.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah, it's EVA foam and barge. It holds up. You guys are welcome to come up and take a look. I think we're done for the panel. We have a few minutes, so you can come check out our stuff. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
This is the top.
This will stay flexible. Also, E6000 is here to stay flexible. Yeah. This one was actually made on E6000.
That's plastic.
This used
Yeah, I had a scissor a spear.
I made it. She was supposed to help me.
And then
That's amazing.
after it's set,
See, I made my first prop today, but I had it 3D printed.
I just
Oh, okay.
I could. They're like, I love using this stuff, I can find it new
Keeps
uses.
us over doing things like this. You know what happened is someone tried to
You
shoot
should see the shield they're gonna have later.
What?
The shield you're gonna have.
Those, these two are really my final stuff. But I just gave just these as an experiment to see what
Look at, there's a little dragon head behind you.
So then after that, when I just restarted.
Sorry, you know,
I don't
I knew
think
you were
this would be a
texting
good
me
material.
Sorry?
we ran too far with this stuff on the market.
So I don't think I could have just recorded for it.
That was crazy.
You have the questions?
No, I just,